My name is Alex. I'm a 28-year-old office worker. A lot happened before I joined this company. My parents ran a small business, so I was put in daycare from a young age. Even though I was an only child, back then, I lived in a rented apartment with my grandfather and my parents. I was really close to my grandfather. Since my mom often came home late, my grandfather would go shopping in the evening, and I would tag along with him. He was a kind man who would cook rice, set out the side dishes he bought, make curry sometimes, and always get me snacks. Physically, I wasn't very strong. My grandfather still worked full-time, so when I got the flu or something, my mom would leave work to take me to the doctor. But I still remember the frustrated look on her face when she said, "You're really a handful." My parents' business wasn't doing well, and they were always arguing about money, which made my nights feel so gloomy. Since the apartment was a bit spacious, I got my own room when I started elementary school. But I couldn't sleep well because I could always hear them quarreling. My grandfather went to bed early and never got involved in their arguments. Even in elementary school, I often stayed home because of headaches or leg pains in the morning. My grandfather, still working, would say, "Take it easy," as he headed out in the morning. My mom was upset, saying, "Are you not feeling well again?" and then head off to work with my dad after she called the school. She once took me to the doctor, but they couldn't figure out what was wrong. Even when I went to school, I would sometimes faint during morning assembly and wake up in the nurse's office. After resting for a while, I'd feel better and return to class. But since I was often absent, I struggled to make friends and usually ended up being alone. School wasn't fun at all, and as soon as classes ended, I would rush home to play video games while waiting for my grandfather to return. My attendance at school was inconsistent, which also affected my studies. There was a boy named Kevin who lived near me and was in the same grade. Kevin would bring me the handouts from the days I missed. And since I was usually alone, I once invited him to play video games. He came over with a smile. Kevin's mom also worked late, so we enjoyed playing games together. Then suddenly, Kevin said, "Oh, I need to do my homework, or my mom will get mad at me." So, we ended up doing homework together. I was already behind in my studies and didn't understand much. Kevin patiently helped me with my homework. But soon enough, another morning came when I couldn't go to school. After a meeting with my teacher, my mom seemed to have stopped by a bookstore on her way back and silently placed several reference books on my desk. I sighed internally, thinking, so I have to study. I really didn't like studying. Since the cause of my condition was unknown, my mom believed I was just pretending to be sick to avoid school. But I genuinely had headaches, and sometimes my stomach would hurt too. One day, Kevin came over again. "Hey, Alex, are you sick?" "Yeah, I really feel bad in the morning, but the doctor can't figure out why," I replied. Kevin gave a mischievous grin. "Look, I snuck this into my backpack today," he said, pulling out a game guide with a smirk. I got really excited. I hated studying, but I loved video games. My parents never bought me any game software, but before my birthday, I would go shopping with my grandfather and convince him to buy me a game. I kept it hidden in my desk drawer, so my mom wouldn't find it and get mad. Kevin looked at my study desk and said, "Oh, reference books. Let me see." It seemed Kevin enjoyed studying. He grabbed one of the books and started writing answers in his notebook. Meanwhile, I got engrossed in the game guide Kevin had lent me. I played through the game alone, trying to figure it out. By the time evening came, my grandfather had returned home. That day, it seemed he was making curry. The smell was amazing. Since I hadn't gone to school, I hadn't eaten lunch that day. Then, my grandfather called us. "Kevin, if you'd like, you can stay and have dinner with us," my grandfather offered, serving Kevin some curry. Kevin happily accepted, thanked my grandfather, and said it was delicious. That's how Kevin and I became good friends. As Kevin was leaving, he said, "Hey, Alex, could you check the answers in the reference book I worked on?" and then headed home. I looked at Kevin's notebook and the reference book. He got everything right. As the days went by, I started to understand my studies a bit more by checking Kevin's answers. Those were the days of our early elementary school years, and soon enough, we moved into the upper grades. But I still occasionally missed school. My mom, as usual, would silently buy new reference books and place them with a thud on my desk. Gradually, I started to get more motivated to study, and Kevin and I would finish our homework together and then enjoy playing games. At night, my parents continued their usual arguments about money. I would try to shake off the stress by playing video games, but even after a bath and getting into bed, I couldn't fall asleep easily because of their voices. So I would turn the volume down and play games late into the night. Looking back, I realized that my erratic lifestyle likely contributed to my sickness in the mornings. Despite everything, I moved on to junior high school. In my first year, I was happy to be in the same class as Kevin, but as middle school studies began, I quickly fell behind. Kevin started going to cram school and became busier. He wasn't much into sports clubs either, so we continued walking home together after school. One night in my second year of junior high, my grandfather collapsed after taking a bath. My mom immediately called an ambulance, and I went to the hospital with her. But my grandfather never regained consciousness and passed away. My beloved grandfather. His funeral was a small one on a cold winter day. After returning home, I cried in my room for days. I even missed school for a while, just staying in bed and crying. After that, my mom would give me money for dinner, and I started buying convenience store meals to eat alone. My attendance at school continued to be irregular throughout my middle school years. Kevin focused on his studies, and I gradually became close to a group of mischievous kids from the after-school club. I would come home to my mom's constant sighs, and with nothing enjoyable at home, I started staying out late, hanging out at my mischievous friends' houses, and sometimes not returning until around 9 p.m. Occasionally, I'd even spend the night at their place. Though I'd let my mom know by text, which she never replied to. The leader of our group had a huge house, and we could play games as much as we wanted there. I continued to miss school. My parents, worn out, didn't even bother scolding me anymore. We'd meet up at convenience stores, buying snacks and meals. Each of my friends seemed to have their own family problems. The leader, who was quite well off, would even buy us drinks, and everyone would hang out at his place, most of them rarely attending school. Kevin started to drift away from me. Maybe bad luck comes in waves. The year after my grandfather passed away, my parents were both killed in a car accident. I didn't know what to do, so my aunt, my dad's sister, stepped in to handle everything. I had lost my family and was left all alone. Even though I wasn't very close to my parents, the sadness still hit me hard. That day, like the day my grandfather died, was another cold winter day. We had to close down my parents' business, and I was able to live in the apartment until I barely graduated from middle school. But since it was a rental, I eventually had to move out. According to my aunt, I received a decent amount of life insurance. However, my dad had debts, and most of the money went towards closing the business and paying off the debts. Naturally, I gave up on going to high school. I didn't even want to go. My aunt became my guardian, and I started living alone in a small apartment without a bath. I needed to work immediately to support myself, so I got a job at a nearby convenience store. I worked early in the mornings. The store manager, Brian Smith, was kind to me and patiently taught me the job, treating me with care. I lost track of my mischievous friends, but I didn't have time to hang out with them anyway. Around that time, my morning health improved, and I settled into a regular routine. But work kept me so busy that I was exhausted by the time I got back to my apartment. Spring arrived, and the cherry blossoms sadly scattered. There was an old-fashioned bathhouse nearby, and I started going there every day to relieve my fatigue. However, the bathhouse fees began to add up with daily visits. Even though it was an unavoidable expense, I decided it was time to start cooking for myself, as I had been relying on convenience store meals every day. I began saving up my wages little by little, buying a rice cooker and kitchen utensils, and after my shifts, I would stop by the supermarket to look for discounted items and try my hand at cooking, even though I was still a novice. I often recalled how my grandfather would skillfully prepare meals. To save on gas, I bought a portable stove. I gathered cooking tools from a dollar store, gradually getting used to cooking for myself while also adjusting to work and managing to get by day. I bought a second-hand, old-fashioned washing machine, and since I didn't have a balcony, I dried my clothes inside the apartment. Work at the convenience store was busy, with tasks like stocking shelves and cleaning. One day, Brian took me out for a meal. "Alex, did you dislike studying?" he asked. "Yeah." I wasn't really a fan, I replied. Brian, knowing my family situation because I had told him when he hired me, didn't press further, but he chuckled and said, "I wasn't too fond of studying either." He then expressed his support for my future work. It was the first time I felt encouraged by someone other than my mom, who only pushed me to study. So I decided to work hard and thanked him before heading to the bathhouse. The old-fashioned bathhouse had a large mural of Mount Fuji on the wall. I would often stare at it, letting it soothe my work-weary body, and then sleep soundly. I started getting to know the people living in the same apartment building, chatting with them at the bathhouse. Being young, I earned their support for my work, and many of them started coming to the convenience store to shop. "Alex, it seems like you've made a lot of new friends recently," Brian commented with a smile. "Yeah, they're my neighbors. They're all good people who cheer me on," I replied, and Brian smiled warmly. Then summer came. I used my savings to buy an air conditioner. Although the store was air-conditioned, it was too hot to sleep at night. After installing the air conditioner, I would cool down after my bathhouse visits. I also managed to save on electricity, and cold noodles became my go-to meal at night. I preferred the heat of summer over the cold of winter. The green of the street trees was beautiful, and the trees glistened after the rain. Winter always reminded me of the day I said goodbye to my grandfather. And I often thought about how I had caused my parents so much worry before they suddenly passed away, never getting the chance to repay them. Summer seemed to pass quickly. One day in the fall, Kevin appeared at the convenience store in his school uniform. He was surprised when he saw me at the register. "Alex, it's been a while. You're working hard and staying on track, I see." "Kevin." "Yeah, I have to work," I replied. Kevin looked relieved and smiled at how much calmer I seemed. After that, I didn't see Kevin again. And once again, winter arrived. The cold wind battered the windows of my shabby apartment, with drafts seeping through the cracks. I didn't feel like I could survive the winter, so I bought a small space heater. Being somewhat sensitive to the cold, I would often find that my body, warmed from the bathhouse, would quickly cool down. I started buying Napa cabbage and making hot pot every day. I tried different variations, sometimes using chicken, making spicy hot pot, or occasionally buying miso to make pork soup to warm up. Adding extra chili powder would heat up my chilled body. By then, I had been working at the convenience store for about 4 years. When I was 19, I found Brian in the office with a guy named Matt, who was his high school friend. Brian called me in, saying he needed to talk. "Alex, actually, the store is going to move to the general hospital in town." "What?" "It would be really tough for you to commute there, so I consulted with my friend Matt here, who was a classmate of mine. He mentioned that a nearby company is looking for an office clerk. Do you think you could work there, Alex?" "What? Me, doing office work? It's mostly simple computer tasks." "It can get pretty busy, but I think you can handle it." "Matt, I'm not very good with computers." "Don't worry. It's just entering numbers," Matt assured me. Since I couldn't afford to lose my job, I decided to take Matt up on the offer. The company was a noodle factory not far from my place, making the commute convenient. Even though I was only a middle school graduate, I was able to get the job, thanks to Matt's introduction. I bought a suit and introduced myself at the office, where a senior colleague showed me the ropes. The company had about 200 clients, and my job was to call each one daily to take their orders. My task was to input those numbers into the computer. I felt a bit relieved, knowing it was just numbers. There was a coworker named Chris, about my age, who shared the workload with me. He was patient in teaching me, and I gradually got the hang of things. It seemed that the previous clerk had quit, and they had urgently posted the job. Chris was the same age as me, and we got along pretty well. The managers were all good people, but my job was quite important. I had to call noodle shops as well as supermarkets, check their stock, and accurately input the orders into the computer. As I became more comfortable with the job, Chris and I split the calls, each handling 100 clients. And I managed to do the work despite feeling a bit nervous. However, I was shocked when I received my first paycheck. Although I was officially an employee, my take-home pay was only about $1,300. Still, I was just a middle school graduate. I didn't have any other skills, and I knew it would be tough to find another job if I tried. I made up my mind to stick with it, saving money where I could, and keep going. One day, I received an email on my phone from Matt, the friend of my former convenience store manager who had introduced me to this job. Matt had told me, "If you ever need anything, just reach out." His message asked, "How's the job going?" So I replied, "Thanks to you, it's going well." I was genuinely touched that he was thinking about me. The workplace had a bit of a family atmosphere, and even though the pay was low, it was a relief to work there. Chris quietly informed me one day, "Hey, sometimes Mr. Harris, the president and son of the chairman, comes by to check the office. When he does, just keep your head down and focus on your work." I thanked Chris and noted his advice. Come to think of it, I had never seen the president's face. I wondered what kind of person he was. About a month later, Mr. Harris made an appearance. Everyone immediately fell silent and started working diligently. Mr. Harris seemed to be in his 40s, with a stern expression and furrowed brows. He silently looked over each person's computer screen before leaving without a word. Everyone looked relieved afterward. Later, Chris told me that Mr. Harris had a short temper and would suddenly start yelling if something displeased him. I felt relieved that nothing had gone wrong during his visit. Afterward, Chris said, "Alex, one of our clients' noodle shops is surprisingly good, and we went there that evening." The food was indeed delicious. Of course, we split the bill, but the prices were reasonable. After that, we would occasionally visit other clients' noodle shops or grab coffee together, and time passed as we grew closer. My salary increased slightly, but it was just a small raise, and I realized I had been wrong to expect much of a bonus. It was just a modest addition to my regular pay. I had upgraded my phone, so I enjoyed playing mobile games before going to bed. I had fun playing online games with Chris. It reminded me of how much I loved games when I was a kid. And once again, the winter I dreaded arrived. The town prepared for Christmas. The lights turned red and blue, and couples walked around looking happy. A girlfriend. It's embarrassing, but that seems like a distant dream for me. With my current low salary, I can barely support myself, let alone think about dating. I asked Chris if he wanted to go to a bar together with our bonus, but unfortunately, he had a date. So we postponed the bar visit to the next day. Snow was falling lightly, and the withered street trees were dusted with snow, like white cherry blossoms. I longed for spring. Snow quietly piled up on my clear umbrella as I walked alone through the streets. The next day, as planned, Chris and I went to the bar. The snow had stopped, but the north wind was biting cold. Sometimes, I would drink a beer at home, pairing it with a homemade hot pot. But this was the first time I went out for drinks with a coworker after the year-end party. We had some nice food, and the alcohol loosened up the conversation. Chris asked me about my school days and how I ended up working at the company. Since I had nothing to hide, I told him about how I disliked school and how I was raised by my grandfather. Chris mentioned that his family runs a small business and eventually he'll have to take it over. He's been with his girlfriend since high school. When I complained about my salary, Chris said he had heard from the senior employees that many people had left the company because of it. But Chris, still living at home, didn't seem too worried about money. Then he invited me to go for a drive after the new year. Chris had a driver's license but mentioned that he usually borrowed his dad's car. For me, it was my first time ever going on a drive. We wrapped up the night looking forward to the outing after the new year. Maybe it was the alcohol, but I felt warm on the way home. It's usually a 30-minute walk from my place to work. I live close to the city. The walk, which usually felt lonely, was more enjoyable as Chris and I laughed and took our time getting back, stretching the walk to about 40 minutes. I've never really felt the excitement of New Year's. Sure, the alcohol tasted good, but I had distant memories of my dad always drinking and complaining to my mom. So, even after becoming an adult, I never overindulged. My mom was strong-willed, so I guess she never let my dad get the better of her. When work wrapped up for the year, I had a few days off, but nothing special happened. I just continued with my usual frugal routine. I spent time playing games, treating myself to a slightly pricier spa visit, and taking it easy. Feeling bored, I went for a walk around the neighborhood and noticed that the community center, which used to be there, had been demolished. I wondered if it had been relocated. I walked quite a bit that day, which was unusual for someone like me who usually sits at a desk. Even in the city, there were quite a few detached houses, and I saw many older people walking their dogs. As an only child, I had always wanted a dog, but pets were prohibited in rented apartments, and of course, they were also forbidden in my current place. Even if I could have one, I thought, with my low income, I probably couldn't afford to take care of a dog. I felt a deep sense of despair about the future. To escape reality, I turned to my usual pastime, playing games. When the new year arrived, as promised, Chris invited me for a drive. He picked me up near my place since the road in front of my apartment was narrow. The car was pretty luxurious. As I got into the passenger seat, I noticed my legs trembling unconsciously. It surprised even me, and Chris noticed, asking if I was okay. I realized that the car had triggered memories of my parents' car accident. I told Chris about it, and he reassured me, saying, "Don't worry, I'll drive safely." After a while, the trembling subsided, and as we drove for about 2 hours, we entered a scenic mountain road. I enjoyed the natural views and the sight of the town from the hills. I returned home feeling very satisfied. At first, I was shocked by my own fear of being in a car, but the wide-open natural scenery had a calming effect on me. Then, the New Year's holiday ended, and it was back to work. I did my best to avoid any mistakes. One Sunday, while out for a walk, I noticed that the empty lot where the community center used to be had been turned into a small park. When I walked through the park, I realized it shortened my commute, so I started taking that route the next day. It also made the walk to the bathhouse shorter. From then on, I walked through the park every day. In spring, the cherry blossoms in the park were beautiful. At work, the number of clients had grown to over 300. Chris and I split the workload, each handling 150 clients. I managed to get home at my usual time. Since I had a set time to wake up in the morning, I began to take my time walking the route, now shorter commute. Enjoying the flowers in the park and taking deep breaths as I headed out. Even though winter felt long and difficult for me, spring and summer seemed to pass by in the blink of an eye. Summer quickly turned into the lonely autumn of falling leaves after I finished visiting the graves. In September, while it was still uncomfortably hot, a homeless man began living in the park I walked through every day. Though I found it a bit unsettling, something about the man's face reminded me of my grandfather, who had passed away too soon. There was a certain resemblance in his profile. One hot evening on my way home from work, I noticed the homeless man seemed to be in bad shape, probably due to the heat. I wanted to call an ambulance, but I figured he wouldn't be able to afford the medical expenses. So I bought him a bottle of water from a vending machine. I approached him and asked, "Are you okay?" He seemed conscious. I handed him the drink and then went home. The next morning, I was relieved to see that the homeless man looked better, sleeping soundly on a bench. The street trees turned red with autumn leaves, and the cold of winter approached. Around that time, Chris's father suddenly passed away from an illness. This forced Chris to leave the company early to take over the family business. I thanked Chris for everything before we said our goodbyes. After that, I had to take on Chris's workload, handling the phone orders and data entry for over 300 clients. Naturally, this led to a lot of overtime. My boss mentioned that a new clerk would be hired soon, but no one came for a long time. The days grew busier, and with that came occasional mistakes, leading to many days of apologizing over the phone to clients for their complaints. Since the clients were troubled by shortages, my boss often had to rush out to make deliveries. And the number of times I had to apologize to him also increased. It was a tough winter. I was always getting home late, my body worn out. I trudged home through the cold, tired from the day. Even though I didn't have much of an appetite, I decided to go to the bathhouse to warm up. When I got there, I saw the usual homeless man, shivering and freezing in the cold. I went back to my apartment and grabbed one of my 2 blankets, extra towels, some clean sweatpants, and an old jacket I no longer wore. I approached the homeless man and said, "Sir, it's far too cold out here. Please, use this blanket." I added, "If you'd like, there's a bathhouse nearby. Why don't we go together? You can warm up. I brought some clothes you can change into too." "Ah, young man. You're the one who brought me a drink the other day. That really helped me. If you're offering, Then I'll go with you," the old man said as he slowly followed me to the bathhouse. Since it was almost closing time, the bathhouse owner didn't say anything. I put the old man's clothes in a plastic bag, lent him some shampoo, and we washed up together in the shower. I quickly washed myself and then helped wash his back. The man smiled, and we both relaxed in the hot bath. He warmed up well, changed into my clean clothes, and left the bathhouse in the jacket I had brought. I walked him back to the park, wrapped the blanket around him to keep him warm, and he said, "You've saved my life twice now, young man." He then curled up on the bench under the blanket. I went back to my apartment, threw away the man's old clothes, and, feeling tired, went to bed early. The next morning, I saw that the man was still sleeping soundly. I went to work and started my usual tasks. As I was taking orders, aiming to handle all 300 plus clients, Mr. Harris suddenly walked into the office. He silently watched me working at my computer for a while. Then he burst out, "Alex, your recent mistakes have caused a flood of complaints from our clients. You're done here. Don't bother coming in tomorrow." "Wait, are you firing me?" "I've been doing my best, handling the workload of 2 people," I protested. "Shut up. I don't want to hear any excuses. I'm the president, and I'm telling you, you're fired," Mr. Harris shouted. I replied, "I understand." In the silent office, I gathered my things, thanked my supervisors, and left the company. Being suddenly fired like that. I walked heavily along the bright afternoon streets, heading back to my apartment. As I passed through the park, someone called out to me, "Young man, are you off work already today?" When I looked closer, it was the usual homeless man. His hair had been cut, and his beard was shaved. He looked so much younger that I barely recognized him, though I guessed he was around 75. I sat down on the bench next to him and said, "Actually, I just got fired from my job." The old man responded, "Well then, shall we go?" I didn't understand what he meant, but I slowly followed him. He led me to the entrance of a luxury apartment building, unlocked the door, and walked in. We took the elevator to the top floor, where he unlocked the door to a large apartment. What is this place?" "This is my home," the old man said, handing me a business card. It read, "Stephen Sullivan, chairman of SS Foods." "Wait, you're the chairman?" I was shocked. I had never seen such an incredible apartment, and the view from the windows was breathtaking. "The place is far too big for me. I want you to have it. You saved my life twice, and because of you, I found a reason to live a little longer," he said. When he asked for my name, I told him. Just then, the intercom buzzed. "Grandpa, are you home?" "I'm coming up now," a woman's voice said. I learned a lot about Stephen from her. The woman, Yvonne, was the old man's granddaughter. She explained that after his wife passed away, Stephen had turned to alcoholic and ended up hospitalized. Yvonne would occasionally come by to clean the apartment, and when her grandfather was discharged, she couldn't find him anywhere. She eventually found him in the park, but he refused to return to the apartment. He explained that staying at home made him drink too much, and he didn't need such a large apartment anymore. The company was being run by Yvonne's mother's husband, who had taken over as president. Stephen's company, SS Foods, was a major corporation with many supermarkets under its umbrella. When Stephen heard why I was fired, he immediately called Mr. Harris, the president of the noodle company I had worked for. "Hello, Mr. Harris? This is Stephen Sullivan. I decided to end all business with your company after you unfairly fired Alex for taking on an impossible workload. Please, Mr. Sullivan, this can't be. Mr. Harris stammered, but Stephen ended the call without further discussion. He had put the call on speaker so I could hear, then smiled at me. Stephen cut ties with the company I had been working for. He said he had heard from acquaintances about how hard I was working. That night, I enjoyed a high-end sushi meal, and soon after, Stephen transferred the ownership of the apartment to me. The luxury high-rise became my home. I couldn't believe it and ran around the apartment like a kid, with Stephen laughing heartily. Yvonne worked from home, and I started learning how to use a computer from her. I was eventually hired as an office clerk at Stephen's company, and my salary tripled. Yvonne and I, who were the same age, grew close and eventually started dating, leading to our marriage. Stephen mentioned that he planned to live nearby, but I asked him to live with us. He was delighted, and now the three of us happily live together in the high-rise apartment. My wife is expecting our first child. It's strange how fate works. Just 2 small acts of kindness towards Stephen changed my life. Now, it feels like my grandfather has come back to me, and I've vowed to protect Stephen and my family from now on. Stay outside and wait. Jason, the younger department head, bluntly told me as I prepared to accompany him on a $30 million overseas business deal. But it was scorching hot outside. Expecting me to wait indefinitely in such heat, not knowing when the meeting would end, was unreasonable. At worst, I could suffer from heat stroke or sunstroke. Yet, Jason insisted it was an order from the department head and walked into the client's office alone, completely disregarding me. 5 hours later, the situation changed when he spotted me still waiting outside, just as he'd instructed, alongside our clients. Do you even know who he is? Ha! That's right, my true identity under Jason's leadership is. My name is Kevin, and I'm 40 years old. I'm an employee at a certain company. Due to certain circumstances, I joined this company, but what I witnessed in the department I was assigned to was shocking. Are you Kevin, the guy who's going to be working in our department? I'm Jason, the department head. You look pretty useless. Make sure you don't drag me down. On my first day, I was immediately looked down upon by Jason, the department head, who was 10 years younger than me. I couldn't think of any reason for it, but it seemed like he judged me solely by my appearance. It was utterly unfair. According to other employees, Jason achieved an unusual promotion at the young age of 30. He was reportedly pushed by the company's president, his father, Mr. Thompson. Apparently, his father was proud of his son who graduated from Tokyo University and had been grooming him to take over the company. And this is the result. Jason had skillfully exploited his father's power and become insufferably arrogant. Stop dawdling and get a move on. He acted as if he had climbed to the top purely by his own merit, treating the employees like mere pawns. The employees under him, seemingly unable to defy his power, hesitantly followed his orders. I watched this scene with a sinking feeling, wondering if I would end up the same way. As expected, Jason's harassment towards me began. "Handle these documents for me," he said, slapping the paperwork down on my desk while I was working on my computer. When I looked up, there was Jason, smirking as he watched my reaction, making my face twitch involuntarily. There wasn't another person who so consistently behaved exactly as I predicted. "You're older than me, but you're still a rookie, so think of this as a learning experience," he said, waving his hand dismissively as he returned to his desk. I sighed in exasperation as I picked up the documents. When I looked through them, I was surprised to find that they were clearly meant for Jason. I was utterly appalled that he would so brazenly offload his work onto a subordinate. Glancing over at him again, I saw him sitting at his desk, glaring at his computer screen. But I doubted that the screen was displaying anything work-related. The thought made me sigh again. With my own work plus these documents to finish, overtime was inevitable. I had planned to leave on time, but now I was caught in the crossfire. And Jason probably knew that as a newbie, I wouldn't be able to handle these documents. Even so, he handed them to me, likely just to make things difficult. It was as if he was saying, "Figure it out by asking other supervisors." His method of supervising employees was highly inappropriate and gave me a headache. In the end, I finished the documents by asking other supervisors for help. But Jason's bizarre behavior didn't stop there. About 3 months after I joined the company, "Just stand there and watch," he said. One day, I accompanied Jason on a sales visit to a client, and he pressured me not to speak or interfere. I reluctantly nodded in agreement. As a newcomer, it seemed wise not to make any excuses at this point. I might as well take this opportunity to observe Jason's sales techniques. "Sorry about the heat in here. The air conditioner broke down, but please help yourselves to some chilled tea," the client said as we arrived at their office. The air conditioning in the room we were shown to had indeed broken down, making it uncomfortably warm, with sweat beading on our foreheads. It's early July, and the temperature outside is about 86 degrees. Opening the windows provided some slight relief, but it was hardly enough to make a difference. I instinctively pulled out a handkerchief from inside my suit to wipe away the sweat. Next to me, Jason looked utterly defeated by the heat. He's probably struggling since the office back at our company is always well air-conditioned. I couldn't help but find his discomfort a bit amusing. Let's take advantage of their hospitality. "Jason, you should have some too," I suggested, accepting the cold tea offered by our host and encouraging Jason to do the same. Jason snapped back to reality, clearly annoyed that I had prompted him, and shot me a sharp glare. "There's no need to be so angry." After that brief exchange, we moved on to the main discussion, and Jason's negotiations with the client began. Though usually careless with his work, Jason switched to business mode during the negotiations. As I sat through the meeting in the sweltering heat, I couldn't help but wish he would treat us employees with the same level of professionalism he was showing now. By the time the meeting ended, the tea I had been given was completely gone. Damn, it's hot. After the negotiations were over and we were on our way back to the office, Jason suddenly declared he couldn't take the heat anymore and decided to take refuge in a nearby cafe. I followed him inside. "Order an iced coffee for me, will you?" "Sure," I replied. And so, as I sat down across from Jason, who had dramatically taken his seat, he instructed me to order the iced coffees. Following his orders, I called the waiter and requested 2 iced coffees. The confident Jason from earlier had reverted to the version of him I was more familiar with, and I couldn't help but shrug. "It's really hot out. Shall we grab lunch while we're at it?" I suggested, noticing that it was already past noon as I glanced at the clock in the cafe. Jason, seemingly struck by a sudden idea, grinned mischievously. "You're paying, of course." "Of course, what would you like?" I responded calmly. Seeing that I wasn't fazed, Jason's mood soured, as if he'd expected me to be annoyed. Unfortunately for him, I don't get worked up over something like this. He gruffly replied, "I'll have the omelet rice," so I called the waiter and ordered an omelet rice for him and spaghetti. By the way, the spaghetti was my order. There wasn't much conversation as we waited, but Jason remained in a foul mood the whole time. And I could understand why. Having lunch with someone you don't particularly like isn't exactly appetizing. But I couldn't help but secretly chuckle at how unexpected it was for Jason to order omelette rice. 1 month later. Though Jason's harassment continued, a new development completely changed the situation. A $30 million overseas deal, huh? A much larger business opportunity than any before had landed in Jason's lap. It was clear that Mr. Thompson had set the stage for his son's further advancement. If this deal were successful, Jason would undoubtedly rise even higher. Since I was scheduled to accompany him, I knew I would be in the spotlight as well, though Jason would likely not be pleased about that. I braced myself, expecting he might do something to sabotage me. And then, the day of the overseas deal arrived. Though the deal was overseas, the client had a branch domestically, so the negotiations were set to take place there. Jason and I made sure to leave early and walked to the client's office, aiming to arrive 5 minutes before the meeting. As we walked, the relentless sunlight bore down on us, searing our skin. The sky was clear with not a cloud in sight, and the sun had been blazing since morning. Ahead, mirages shimmered on the road. Wiping the sweat from my brow with a handkerchief, we finally arrived at the client's office without incident. But suddenly, I was startled by Jason's loud, abrupt laughter. "What's so funny?" I asked, initially worried that the heat had gotten to him, but it seemed that wasn't the case. Despite the sweat trickling down his forehead, Jason smiled wickedly and said, "Old man, wait outside." What? For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what he had just said. Was he really telling me to wait alone in this scorching heat? Surely, even for me, that would be too dangerous. There was a serious risk of heat stroke or sunstroke. "Jason, are you serious?" "It's dangerous to stay outside in this kind of heat," I protested. "If you start feeling faint, just find somewhere else to hide out." "But you're not coming inside. I'm going to nail this $30 million deal on my own. I don't need you messing up my bright future." Despite being told to accompany him, Jason clearly intended to keep me completely out of the negotiation, hoarding all the credit for himself. He didn't care what happened to me out here. "This is a direct order from your department head. Just stay put and wait here. I'll close this deal successfully, so don't worry," he said, dismissively waving his hand as he walked into the building. Left behind, I felt a mix of emotions but decided to find some shade and wait. I spotted a tree nearby and sat down in its shadow. Thankfully, I had brought a thermos filled with ice water, anticipating something like this might happen. As I sipped from it, I was reminded of the delicious tea I had during a recent visit with Jason to another client whose air conditioning had broken down. Since then, I always carried a thermos with me. With this, I should be able to avoid heat stroke. Now, all I had to do was wait for Jason. After about 5 hours, I finally saw Jason and the client emerge from the building, and I stood up. "Thank you, it's truly a dream come true," Jason said in a cheerful voice, clearly pleased with the outcome of the negotiations. I walked over to them. "I've been waiting for you, Jason," I said. You actually stayed out here the whole time?" Jason asked, clearly shocked. The client, noticing me as well, turned to look in my direction. The moment he saw me, his face registered utter disbelief. His name tag read, Edward. "Yes, I've been waiting here for about 5 hours. So, how did the $30 million deal go?" I asked. "Of course, I nailed it with my skills," Jason boasted, his chest puffed up with pride. Edward, however, grew increasingly pale as he observed the exchange between Jason and me. Then, grabbing Jason by the shoulder, he said with a fierce expression, "Do you even know who this man is?" "Ha?" Jason furrowed his brow, utterly confused by Edward's sudden outburst. "Who?" "He's just an employee from our company and my subordinate." "But he's completely useless." "So I told him to stay outside instead of bringing him to the negotiations," Jason said, recalling the event with a hearty laugh. Edward, however, stared at him with a face drained of color. You have no idea what you've done, do you?" Edward muttered, clutching his head in despair. "What? What do you mean what I've done? What's going on?" Jason asked, bewildered by Edward's reaction. I could barely contain my amusement at the situation unfolding before me. I couldn't help but laugh and decided it was time to reveal the truth. "Actually, Jason, this isn't the first time I've met Edward." "What? No way. Are you just making this up?" Jason sneered, dismissing my words as if they were a joke. Given that I had only been with the company for 4 months and had little sales experience, it wasn't surprising that he found my story unbelievable. "Enough of this nonsense. I won't tolerate any more disrespect toward this man. He is the future president of our company." Edward's voice boomed, cutting through the tension. "What?" "The future president of the client company," Jason stammered, staring at me in shock. When I noticed his gaze, I smiled and decided to clarify further. "I apologize for keeping my identity hidden. The truth is, before taking over as the next president, I wanted to gain some experience. So, I left my father's company and joined yours, Jason." "This is your father's company?" Jason's eyes widened in disbelief as he glanced up at the building where the negotiations had just taken place. Indeed, it was much larger than Jason's company, but that wasn't the main point. "Yes, that's correct. It will be my company soon, but I'm glad I took the time to learn more about the business world. Especially since I discovered that someone like you, Jason, is working with our clients," I continued. As the meaning of my words sank in, Jason's face turned pale. It was only natural, given how he had mistreated me and deliberately excluded me from today's negotiations. "I will, of course, report your behavior to my father," I stated firmly. "Wait. If I had known you were the future president of the client company, I never would have done this," Jason pleaded desperately. "Crying about it won't help you, Jason. Besides, I have a witness. Edward here has heard everything," I pointed out. Jason snapped back to reality at those words, and this time, he glanced fearfully at Edward. Edward, clearly angry, nodded in agreement with my statement and then shot a piercing glare at Jason. "Edward is also my father's close advisor. He'll continue in that role once I become president. So, I have no intention of allowing any troublemakers into the company. I'd prefer to cut ties with any company that employs someone like you." "Wait. I have incredible negotiation skills, right? I closed this $30 million deal, didn't I? You can't just cut me loose." Jason's desperation was palpable. "No matter how skilled you are at negotiations, no one will follow a person who treats employees like pawns and uses them as stepping stones to climb the ladder." "What do you think, Edward?" I asked, turning to him for his opinion. Edward nodded again, fully agreeing with my assessment. Then, he spoke up. "The deal we just negotiated is null and void. No matter how skilled you are, I can't enter into a contract with someone who disrespects the future president of our company. Edward's quick thinking saved the day, as the contract had not yet been signed and was awaiting approval from Mr. Anderson, the current president. Had the contract been signed, Jason might have used it as leverage to create more problems. It was a relief to have avoided that scenario. "Since the contract hasn't been signed, you may as well leave now," Edward said, delivering the final blow. "No way." Jason's voice was barely a whisper as despair washed over him. Edward then invited me to come inside the building, and as I walked past Jason, I couldn't resist delivering one final comment. "It's truly unfortunate, Jason. If we had worked together, our future could have been bright. Both of our companies could have thrived even more. But upon further reflection, it's clear that you and I are fundamentally different." I paused beside Jason and said those words. In that moment, I realized there was a significant difference between us, even though we were both set to inherit our parents' companies. While you stayed sheltered in your father's company, doing as you pleased, I was out in the world, gaining real experience. You may boast about your skills, but in the end, you've only ridden on the coattails of your father's success. With that, I gave a victorious smile, walked past him, and entered the building with Edward. Jason, left speechless, collapsed to the ground and sat there in a daze. Later, when an employee came by to check on him and told him to move aside, Jason slumped his shoulders and slowly walked away from the company. Defeated. Did he really do that to you? We should confront him about it. There's no need to bother, really. Please, don't worry about it. I replied as I sat on the sofa in a cool, air-conditioned meeting room, recounting the events to Edward. Edward was outraged upon learning of Jason's actions, and it was clear he hadn't seen me in a while. Not since I told him I would be working at another company for experience. His anger on my behalf was almost touching, and it made it easier to let go of all the things Jason had done to me. Especially after waiting 5 hours in the scorching sun earlier, Edward went out of his way to take care of me. Though his concern might have been a bit over the top, I was handed every possible cooling device the company had. I understood his reaction. Before this, I wouldn't have even carried a chilled thermos, so his worry was somewhat justified. When he brought out a 2-liter bottle of water, concerned I hadn't had enough to drink, I was genuinely taken aback. "I'm really fine, I promise." I took refuge under a tree planted by the company, so I spent my time in the shade. If that tree hadn't been there, I might have been out in the blazing sun the whole time. I explained, reassuring Edward that there was no need to worry. Besides, I had another item that saved me. The thermos I had brought with me. "Kevin, you actually carried a thermos? You're usually the type to just grab something from a vending machine. That's why I'm glad I did some real-world learning." I picked up the habit after experiencing that ice-cold tea at the client's office. "I'll never forget how refreshing it was," I replied. The room where the air conditioner had broken was sweltering, but what I gained from that experience was invaluable. Thanks to that cold tea, I managed to stay cool in the shade during the heat wave. And I learned that every unexpected situation can be a lesson. As I smiled at the thought, Edward looked at me with a puzzled expression, unsure of what to make of it all. But ultimately, he was relieved that things hadn't escalated into something more serious. Meanwhile, back at his company, Jason wasted no time reporting the incident to his father, Mr. Thompson. However, the response Jason received was not what he expected. "What? I'm being demoted?" To Jason's shock, he was informed that he would be demoted effective immediately. Earlier today, someone representing Kevin came by to deliver his resignation effective immediately, along with his resignation letter. It turns out he's the son of the president of one of our major clients and the future president himself," Mr. Thompson said, fixing Jason with a stern look. Jason recoiled at his father's severe gaze as Mr. Thompson continued. "In exchange for overlooking the numerous incidents of harassment you've subjected Kevin to, they requested that we nullify the overseas deal and that you be demoted. I agreed, promising to take this matter seriously, even though you're my son, and to maintain a good relationship with their company. But there's no avoiding your demotion. But you're my father. Shouldn't you be on my side?" Jason protested. "If I didn't take this action, our company would go under." "Is that what you want?" Mr. Thompson's voice rose as he questioned his son. Jason fell silent, finally beginning to grasp the severity of his situation. Seeing the dawning realization on Jason's face, Mr. Thompson spoke again. "You should understand by now that their company, with its international branches, holds a stronger position than ours. If you don't want to end up out on the street, you'd better comply. It seems I overestimated you." Unaware that his son had been abusing his power, Mr. Thompson felt a deep sense of disappointment as he spoke those final words. It was only then that Jason realized the gravity of his mistakes. And so, Jason's demotion was finalized. A year later, Jason had returned to the role of a regular employee and was starting over. The arrogance he once displayed was gone, and he had stopped treating employees like mere pawns. Instead, he was now actively working hard on his tasks. His goal was to one day regain his position as department head, and he was gradually rebuilding trust with both his father, Mr. Thompson, and the employees. As for me, I successfully took over as president of my father's company. My father was a strict man, and it took a long time to earn his approval, but a year after returning to the company, I finally did. All the effort I put in, including my time spent learning in another company, wasn't wasted. Edward, from today onward, I'll be counting on you as my advisor," I said. "Of course. Since I served your father well, you can count on me to do the same for you," Edward replied confidently. I couldn't help but laugh at his self-assured tone. But I also found it reassuring. With him by my side, I felt that I could achieve things that would be impossible alone. It was actually Edward who had taken the lead a year ago, visiting Mr. Thompson on my behalf to handle my resignation. After I shared the details of Jason's misdeeds, Edward volunteered to step in as my representative. There aren't many people like Edward, loyal, capable, and completely dedicated. He had served as my father's close advisor for years, and his loyalty extended to me as well. Apparently, Edward felt a deep sense of gratitude toward my father for helping him in the past, though neither of them ever shared the details. I didn't press for more information. I had more important things to focus on. Starting today, I was officially the president, and I needed to concentrate on my new responsibilities. With experience under my belt and a strong team at my side, I was determined to lead the company to greater heights. My name is Ryan. I'm currently working as a driver for a female CEO. My employer, Ms. Smith, is a kind woman, respected for her generous donations to various causes. She should be coming out soon, right? I glanced at the clock, confirming that the dinner meeting was about to end. Just then, Ms. Smith appeared from the restaurant and smiled warmly at me. "Thank you for waiting, Ryan." I opened the backseat door, and Ms. Smith got in with a smile. "Hey, hold on a second. That's a nice car you got there. And with a personal driver too." The loud voice came from a man who looked unmistakably like a Mafia. Behind him, a group of similarly tough-looking men followed. 1, 2, 7 in total. I need to get the car moving quickly. I shut the backseat door and swiftly got into the driver's seat. I started the engine and was about to drive away, but... No, Ryan, you can't. There's someone in front of the car. Damn it, too late. I'm sorry, Miss Smith. A man blocked our path, grinning wickedly right in front of the car. I couldn't just run him over, even if he was Mafia. Our company's reputation was at stake. Hey, open up. If you don't, we'll break it down. The Mafia banged on the car and grabbed the door handle. What the? It's unlocked. Damn it. In my haste, I hadn't locked the car, and the men flung the doors open. Miss Smith and I were forcibly dragged out of the car by the men. Let's see that rich face of yours. One of the Mafia grabbed Ms. Smith by the chin. Jake. Doesn't this face look familiar to you? Oh yeah, I've seen her on TV. She's that rich lady CEO. Lucky us, running into someone with so much money. The man called Jake looked at Miss Smith's face, clearly thrilled. And she's quite the looker too. We're gonna have some fun with this one. Jake smirked as he eyed Miss Smith up and down. What do you want? Miss Smith asked curtly, and Jake nodded. I'm Jake, underboss of the Golden Vipers. I want money. Hand it over. Jake laughed heartily as he spoke. You've been donating to some children's homes or something, right? And a whole $1 million at that. Instead of giving to all those random places, how about you donate to us instead? Jake leaned in close, but Miss Smith glared at him from up close. I want to use my money to help those in need. You guys don't look like you're in need, so I'm not interested in giving it to you. What did you just say, you rich bitch? Are you looking down on the Mafia? How dare you talk to me like that? Despite Jake's enraged shout, Miss Smith remained unfazed. I have more appointments after this. If you don't have any real business, I'll be leaving now. There's no way I'm letting you go just like that. As Miss Smith tried to stand, Jake grabbed her arm tightly. Hey, let's take this lady CEO back to the office. A woman like her will be eager to hand over the cash once we threaten her a bit. Jake's crude smile made my blood boil. You bastard. Ryan, stop. It's okay. Miss Smith stopped me as I was about to shout in anger. But Miss Smith. When I looked at her, she shook her head. She then turned back to the grinning Mafia. Fine. I'll go with you to your office. But this man is just a driver. He has nothing to do with this. Please let him go. Miss Smith. She's about to be taken by the Mafia, yet she's still protecting me, just a driver. What a kind person. But I can't let them take her. Moved by Miss Smith's words, I stepped in front of her. Miss Smith is my benefactor. I can't allow her to be taken to a Mafia office. What's this? Stepping up like you're somebody, you little nobody. With those words, Jake punched me hard in the stomach. Ryan. Since he's so eager to protect her, let's take him along too. It'll be more fun to make him watch what we do to his precious boss. Jake ordered his men to drag us both away. We were forcibly loaded into the Mafia's car and taken to their office. Once there, the men inside bowed their heads to Jake. Hey, where's Boss Carson? He's out right now. We don't know when he'll be back. Poof. That's convenient. Confirming that the boss was absent, Jake took us to his own room. This place brings back memories. As I was being carried through the office like luggage, I muttered those words without thinking. Ha! Oh, it's nothing. Once inside, Jake forced Miss Smith and me to sit on the floor. All right, let's continue the money talk. I want that $1 million too. Your company makes enough to donate that much, right? That's not something I can just hand over on a whim. When Miss Smith refused, Jake slapped her across the face. What do you think you're doing to Miss Smith? I jumped up in anger and punched Jake in the face. Startled, Jake swung back at me, but I dodged and hit him on the other cheek. Ryan, stop. Miss Smith's voice made me freeze. If I really let loose, I could take these guys down and get Miss Smith out of here easily. But if I do, my past might be revealed. I glanced at Miss Smith's face. If my past comes out, I might not be able to work for her anymore. As I hesitated, a huge mafia who had been watching from behind tackled me to the ground. Another mafia then punched me in the face. Damn it, I'm getting beaten. Unable to resist, I was pummeled by the mafia. Ryan! Are you okay? Miss Smith rushed over to me as I lay on the floor, gently placing my head on her lap. This is terrible. I'm so sorry I got you involved in this. Hearing her cry made me feel even worse. Hey, we're not done talking yet. Look at my face. Your driver punched me twice, so how about you pay $2 million more? Jake pointed to the cheek I had punched. Honestly, I was planning to have some fun with you since you looked pretty when I saw you outside. But now that I see you up close, you're just some old hag over 30, so I'll pass. So, are you going to pay up, or are you going to hell? You dare speak to Miss Smith like that? And $2 million for just 2 punches? I'll never forgive this mafia scum. Looking up at Miss Smith, I saw her biting her lip, deep in thought. Maybe she was considering negotiating the amount. Miss Smith. Worried, I called out to her softly. She gave me a pale smile. It's okay. I'll find a way to solve this. What are you whispering about with your driver? You've got only 2 choices. With those words, Jake approached us, grabbing Miss Smith by the chin and forcing her to look up. Pay $3 million, or take a one-way trip to the afterlife. Choose. I saw tears welling up in Miss Smith's eyes as she was held by the chin. You insult Miss Smith, someone I deeply respect, and then threaten her life if she doesn't pay? How dare you tell her she's headed to hell right in front of me? Hey, who do you think you are, talking to Miss Smith like that? Oh. What's this? The driver's angry, huh? Jake sneered at my words, mocking me. If I stand by and do nothing, Miss Smith will be in serious danger. I can't just watch this happen. Even if my past gets exposed, I have no choice but to take these guys down. I made up my mind and decided to take out the mafia in front of me. Give me 1 minute. I'll handle this. I gently patted Miss Smith's trembling shoulder as I held her in my lap and quickly stood up. Ryan, don't do anything reckless. Ignoring Miss Smith's pleas, I charged at the stunned mafia. I knocked out one of the huge mafia who couldn't react in time with a punch to the jaw. What are you doing? Are you seriously thinking of taking on all of us? I smoothly took down another mafia standing nearby. In no time, only Jake was left standing. What the hell are you? This is crazy. How are you beating us all? Jake was shocked as I continued to take down the larger mafia. He started backing away, looking terrified. Without answering his question, I closed in on Jake and landed a heavy punch to his midsection. How is Ryan that strong? Miss Smith's voice trembled with surprise from behind me. I turned to her with a wry smile and offered her my hand. We'll talk later. Let's get out of here now. I took Miss Smith's hand and started to leave the room. I know where your company is. Don't think you'll get away with this. You messed with the underboss of Golden Vipers, and you won't get off easy. Jake shouted from where he lay on the floor, but we didn't look back as we exited the room. As we stepped out of the office, some of the older Mafia members who had been with Golden Vipers for a long time caught sight of me. A few of them exclaimed in surprise, but I ignored them and walked past. Once we were outside and far enough from the office, I finally stopped. Miss Smith, I'm so sorry for putting you in such danger. Ryan, this wasn't your fault. In fact, thank you for saving me. Miss Smith smiled warmly and continued speaking. And about your past. About that. It's okay. I won't ask about it until you're ready to tell me. Miss Smith's promise gave me a sense of relief. It looks like I'll still be able to work as Miss Smith's driver. But more importantly, I can't let my guard down. Jake won't give up that easily. A week after the incident, I was waiting in the car as usual, prepared to drive Miss Smith to her next appointment. We should leave soon if we want to make it on time. Is her meeting running late? As I glanced at the clock, wondering why Miss Smith was taking so long, I suddenly heard a woman scream. What? What's going on? I got out of the driver's seat and looked toward the building where our office was located. I saw people running out, screaming. Several companies operate in the building, but the ones coming out were all employees from our company. Is something happening at the office? Could it be those Golden Vipers guys again? I rushed into the building and hurried to our office floor. As I suspected, it's them again. Inside the office, I spotted Jake and the hulking Mafia. The Mafia were wielding bats, and the office was in complete disarray. They were mercilessly smashing computers with their bats. The employees were all pressed against the walls, trembling with fear. Try and stop us if you can. We're Mafia from the Golden Vipers. Jake shouted gleefully. Ignoring the employees' attempts to hold her back, Ms. Smith stepped in front of Jake. Everyone, get out of here quickly. I'll handle this. Go on, hurry. Ms. Smith commanded her employees, glaring at Jake with unwavering resolve. Though anxious, the employees followed her orders and fled the company. Now, only the Mafia, Ms. Smith, and I remained in the office. Wow, protecting your employees first, what a perfect boss. But I don't care about them. My targets are you and that driver over there. Of course. I can't let my employees get hurt. Ms. Smith retorted, even as Jake grabbed her by the collar, making it hard for her to breathe. Let go of her, right now. Why should I? What makes you think I'll do what you say? Anyway, Ms. Smith, hurry up and pay me the $3 million. And hand over that arrogant driver. I won't be satisfied until I beat him to a pulp. My answer hasn't changed. I refuse. Now, let go of me. Oh? Is that so? With those words, Jake lifted Ms. Smith off the ground by her collar. Stop it. Ms. Smith struggled, kicking her legs in the air. Ms. Smith. Hey, knock it off. I rushed over to them, raising my hand to punch Jake, who was still holding Miss Smith by the collar. With both hands occupied, Jake couldn't defend his face, and I landed a solid punch. Ow. Get him. Don't underestimate him like last time. Spitting out blood-tinged saliva, Jake ordered the other Mafia to attack. The Mafia, grinning confidently, seemed to think they could beat me as long as they didn't let their guard down. This time, we're ready, and we've got weapons too. Doesn't matter. Weaklings stay weak, no matter what they're holding. With that, I charged toward the hulking Mafia. They sneered, laughing at me for coming at them unarmed. "Ryan, don't do this," Miss Smith shouted in a voice full of despair, covering her eyes as if she couldn't bear to watch. "They think numbers matter in a fight. It doesn't make a difference how many of these guys there are." The Mafia, uncoordinated and clumsy, were easy to take down. They tried to attack all at once, but ended up getting in each other's way. Without taking a single hit, I systematically knocked them out, one by one. As fewer and fewer Mafia remained standing, Jake's expression changed from smug confidence to sheer disbelief. "What the hell is going on? Why, you idiots? He's just one unarmed civilian." The cocky grin vanished from Jake's face as he struggled to comprehend what was happening. "This is the end for you. You're the only one left. This can't be real. We all got taken out by just one guy." Jake muttered in shock as I swiftly subdued the remaining Mafia. He shook his head in denial, unable to accept reality. "No way. There's no way you could take us all down by yourself," Jake screamed, charging straight at me. I smirked, using his momentum to throw him to the ground with a hard slam. Jake hit the floor with a heavy thud, writhing in pain. "Do you even know who I am? I'm the underboss of Golden Vipers. If you lay a hand on me, boss won't let you off easy." Jake, battered and bruised, somehow managed to stand up and threatened me. "So what if you're the underboss of Golden Vipers? That means nothing to me." "What? You're not scared of the Mafia, even though you're just a civilian? The fact that someone like you could become the underboss says a lot about how low the bar is." With that, I delivered a powerful kick to Jake's gut. He groaned, doubling over and collapsing to the ground. The other Mafia were all down, leaving the room eerily quiet. "Wait a second, is Miss Smith okay?" Snapping back to reality, I quickly looked around for Miss Smith. She was in the corner of the room, watching me intently. "Miss Smith, are you all right?" I approached Miss Smith, who had been grabbed by the collar earlier, and she looked at me with a puzzled expression. "You're a bit ruffled." "Oh, thank you. I'm fine, but..." Hearing my words, Miss Smith quickly straightened her disheveled collar. She glanced at the fallen Mafia and the groaning Jake, then finally turned her gaze back to me. "Ryan, who exactly are you? You promised I wouldn't have to ask, but..." She looked at me with a puzzled expression, and all I could do was give a wry smile. "It seems I can't keep it hidden any longer." Given everything that had happened, I knew it was time to reveal my past. There was no point in staying silent any longer. Just as I was about to speak, Jake interrupted by shouting, "Damn it! This isn't over. You'll pay for this. Miss Smith, please wait for a moment." I knelt down in front of Jake, who was clutching his stomach and whining. "You better remember this. I'll bring this company down no matter what it takes." Jake spat venomously as he sat on the floor, and I sighed. "Still not giving up, huh? Fine. I'll call your boss for you." I pulled out my phone and started dialing. "The boss? Who are you calling? The cops? Ha, good luck with that. The police around here are in our pocket." Jake sneered, thinking he had the upper hand, but I just grinned. I'm not calling the cops. I'm calling your boss, Boss Carson. What? Boss Carson. That's right. Boss Carson, the head of Golden Vipers. The phone rang a few times before someone finally picked up. This is Carson. Who's this? I don't recognize the number. Hello, it's been a while. This is Ryan. When I introduced myself, I heard Carson sharply inhale in surprise. Ryan. It's been a long time. What's going on? Jake, the underboss of Golden Vipers, and some of his lackeys caused a scene at my workplace. I've got them detained. Can you come pick them up? Give me the address. You're there too, right? I'll be there immediately. After I gave him the address of the company, he quickly ended the call. All right, your boss will be here soon. How do you even know his number? Jake asked in confusion, but then a sly grin spread across his face. Well, whatever. When he gets here, you're finished. Jake's bravado made me chuckle. A few minutes later, Boss Carson literally burst into the room, followed by several of his men. He was out of breath, clearly having rushed to get here. You got here fast, Carson. I thought you'd take longer. It was much quicker than I expected. Breathing heavily, likely from rushing to prevent me from leaving, Carson caught his breath as Jake spoke up. Boss. Do something about this jerk. He laid hands on me, the underboss of Golden Vipers, and my men. If you let this slide, I'll lose all respect. Jake, still thinking Carson was on his side, shouted in frustration, but Carson didn't even glance at him. Ryan. Is it really you, Ryan? It's been so long. With those words, he embraced me, tears streaming down his face. Boss? You know this guy? Jake asked, shocked by his strange behavior. What? Boss Carson, the head of Golden Vipers, knows Ryan? What's going on? It wasn't just Jake who was shocked. Miss Smith, who had been quietly observing the situation, also spoke up in surprise. I've kept my past hidden, but I used to be the underboss of Golden Vipers 8 years ago. You were a Mafia? Yes. I have no criminal record, but it's true I was part of Golden Vipers. 8 years ago, after a certain incident, I left the Mafia world and was taken in by this company. Wait, you were the underboss of my organization? Jake exclaimed, and Carson continued the story. Yes, Ryan was the most trusted underboss I ever had, and he was even a candidate to be the next boss. But during a gang conflict, Ryan was in a serious car accident when a rival group rammed his car. He lost his fiancée in that accident, and after that, he decided to leave the Mafia life. That's right. It's all in the past now. But I'm just so glad to see you again. So, you were our underboss? I've heard legends about your strength, but you had already retired by the time I joined, so I never saw your face. Jake then dropped to his knees and bowed deeply to me. What's with calling me like that? The way he groveled made my skin crawl as Jake forced a sycophantic smile. In Golden Vipers, you are a legend. I had no idea it was you. Please forgive me for my ignorance. Jake bowed so low that his forehead nearly smacked the floor. I looked at him with cold eyes, unmoved by his sudden apology. After everything you've done, an apology doesn't mean anything to me. Boss, I know it's not my place as someone who's left the organization, but say whatever you need to, Ryan. Then I'll be frank. Do you know that Jake has been targeting civilians? An underboss who openly attacks companies during the day isn't doing the organization any favors. You're right. I didn't realize he'd gone this far. Carson nodded at my words, falling silent for a moment as he pondered. It's strange that this hasn't blown up into a bigger problem before now. Boss, I apologize. I might have gone a bit too far this time, but I was about to get $3 million from this woman. I plan to give a good portion of it to the organization as tribute. You idiot! Did you really think you could get away with extorting that much money through such methods? I'm sorry. I was short-sighted. Jake quickly bowed his head as Carson roared at him. Abusing your position as underboss and endangering the organization can't be overlooked. I'm going to strip you of your rank and expel you from Golden Vipers to make you take responsibility. That sounds fair. I nodded in agreement, satisfied with his decision. Jake's face turned pale at the mention of being expelled. Wait, please. You can't just expel me out of nowhere. Isn't a demotion or pay cut more appropriate? Are you defying the boss's orders now? Watch your mouth. With that, Carson struck Jake, sending him flying across the room. You brought this on yourself. You never had what it takes to be the underboss of Golden Vipers. I made a mistake putting you in Ryan's place after he left. No way. I'm fit to be the underboss. Please, reconsider. I can still be of use to Golden Vipers. No matter what you say, the expulsion stands. Jake staggered to his feet, then collapsed at Carson's feet, clinging to him desperately. You've been good to me ever since I joined Golden Vipers. I've tried my best to repay that kindness. Please, forgive me. Jake began to sob, but Carson ignored him. I think it's time for him to take responsibility for his actions. Got any suggestions? I glanced at Ms. Smith and pointed at Jake. Ms. Smith was the one directly affected by this man. So, it's only right that she decides what happens to him. What would you like to do with him? Me? I can decide? Ms. Smith asked, looking a bit unsure as she glanced over at Carson. Yeah. The organization has already expelled him. The decision is yours. In that case, I'd like him to work to help those in need. There are so many people in Japan who are struggling, and there's always a shortage of hands. I'd like to see him put to work helping others. Interesting idea. There's a nursing home we run that's separate from Golden Viper's operations. Maybe we could have him work there. What? A nursing home? No way, I'm not doing that. Jake tried to refuse, but Carson glared at him. Shut up. Just working there isn't much of a punishment, though. Here's what we'll do. He'll donate half of his salary. And we'll assign someone to watch him around the clock to make sure he doesn't cause any trouble and actually works hard. Ms. Smith smiled warmly at Carson's proposal. I think that's a wonderful idea. That's a very Ms. Smith kind of peaceful solution. I couldn't help but smile at her kindness. Hey! You're not just gonna decide my fate without my input. What about my say in this? You don't get a say when we're talking about your punishment. Carson shot back, dismissing Jake's protests. There's no way I'm working at some nursing home. I won't do it. Is that so? If you can't go willingly, we'll just have to drag you there. With that, Carson ordered his men to restrain Jake. Let go of me. I was the underboss. Jake thrashed and flailed, trying to resist. But the men tied up his hands and feet and lifted him off the ground. I'm not taking care of old people at a nursing home, no way. Jake continued to thrash and resist as they carried him away. I sighed, leaned close to his ear, and whispered, "We could always lie to Miss Smith, say we sent you to the nursing home, and just dump you in the ocean instead. I'm sure Boss Carson was tempted to make you disappear for real. You should be grateful you're still breathing." The ocean. That's how the Mafia settle things. Ms. Smith is being merciful by letting you work at a nursing home. The ocean or the nursing home? Exactly. If you don't want to work, fine, we'll send you swimming. But if you'd rather avoid that, you'd better start cooperating. I whispered in a low voice as Jake looked up at me. Staring into my eyes, Jake seemed to realize that I was deadly serious. All right. I'll work at the nursing home. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. Well, if you're willing to work voluntarily, that's the best outcome. Miss Smith, unaware of my threat, clapped her hands together and smiled. We'll untie your legs so you can walk on your own. Carson's men set Jake down on the floor, and I untied his feet. Jake stood up and, facing Miss Smith and Carson, bowed his head. I decided to reflect on my actions and work at the nursing home. Please, keep an eye on me to make sure I'm doing it right. Ms. Smith beamed at his declaration. Of course, I'll make sure you're doing well. Jake's trying to secure himself by asking Miss Smith to watch over him, hoping she'll forget and he'll avoid punishment later. I thought bitterly, glancing at Miss Smith, who was still smiling warmly at me. Oh well. He'll be monitored 24/7 in a civilian world he once looked down on. Taking care of the very civilians he used to despise is the perfect punishment for someone as prideful as him. He may think it's better than being dumped in the ocean, but I could already picture the struggles he would face. Good luck. I extended my hand to Jake, offering a handshake. As soon as he grasped my hand, I squeezed it tightly, crushing his fingers. Jake winced in pain, and I leaned in close, whispering in a low voice, I'll be watching you, too. The moment you step out of line, you're done. It'd be easy to make you disappear in an accident. Don't think Miss Smith will always be there to protect you. After driving the point home, I released his hand and smiled warmly. Jake, now visibly shaken, made no further resistance as he walked out of the company on his own. 6 months passed since Jake was sent to the nursing home. At first, he was useless, but now, I heard he had gotten the hang of the job. Recently, he even sent a letter of thanks to Miss Smith. It's amazing how much a change in environment can affect someone. Who would have thought that guy could turn into a decent person? Jake now said that working at the nursing home had become his calling. Meanwhile, I continued working as Miss Smith's driver, never once questioned about my past. I always figured that day would come eventually, and today, it finally did. 6 months after the incident, I was summoned to the CEO's office. I guess she's finally decided that she can't keep a former Mafia on staff. All right, I'll accept it gracefully and thank her for everything. I knocked on the door. It's Ryan. Come in. Entering the room, I found Miss Smith sitting there, looking a bit nervous. Have a seat. I sat down in the chair opposite her, noticing that she seemed hesitant to speak. She's too kind to fire someone easily. That's probably why she's struggling to say it. I'm sorry for keeping my past a secret. I knew I'd have to resign if my Mafia background was discovered. Oh, I see. Yes. I wanted to stay by your side, helping someone who cares so much about others. Thank you for everything. Wait, hold on a second. You called me in to fire me, right? No, no. I want you to stay with me too. But not as a CEO and a driver. Would you consider dating me with marriage in mind? Miss Smith, her face flushed red, asked me, her voice trembling slightly. If you're okay with me, I'd be honored. Surprised, I replied, smiling at this unexpected turn of events. It's been a while, John. Wait, is that you, Chris? What are you doing here? What? Did you actually get invited? Unbelievable. My teen really dropped the ball. What do you mean? At my level, I don't even bother with writing out my own wedding invitations. I had my staff handle all of it. But I can't believe they sent one to you too. Well, since you're already here, I guess there's nothing I can do about it. John said this with a smirk on his face. Looking back, even when we were in the same class, he always looked down on me. It seems that even now, as adults, his fundamental personality hasn't changed. Anyway, whatever. So, are you going to stay and participate? Well, I came here to congratulate you on your wedding, so yeah. Just make sure you don't embarrass me in front of my wife, alright? She's a famous idol, after all. Plus, I graduated from Harvard and some of my friends are here too, so don't make me look bad. I was stunned into silence by his words. He was certainly smart, but Harvard University is one of the top universities in the world. Harvard University. That's really impressive. Of course it is. I'm just on a different level than someone like you. Despite his impressive background, I couldn't help but wonder why his personality was so terrible. But this was his wedding day. Causing a scene here would just be rude. With that in mind, I headed towards the guests' tables. Hey everyone, long time no see. Oh, you made it too. Man, John marrying an idol. That's something to be jealous of. Yeah. He mentioned something like that. I wonder who the idol is. Wait, seriously? You don't know? You must not be watching TV these days. You're so out of touch. Everyone around me laughed when I said that. Was it really that strange? She must be pretty famous. Well, John is a genius who graduated from Harvard, after all. As I was saying this, it was time for the bride and groom to make their entrance. I wondered who this famous idol could be. I watched the two of them with curiosity. And the moment I saw the bride's face, I felt a chill run down my spine. Thank you all for gathering here today. During the bride and groom's greeting, she looked directly at me. Our eyes locked, and my heart started racing. I know there's usually a certain order to these things, but since this is my wedding, I hope you'll forgive me for a slight breach of etiquette. There's someone I want to thank first. Mr. Chris Tanner, sitting at the back. With a smile, the bride pointed straight at me as she said this. My name is Chris Tanner. I'm currently the CEO of a company that sells health supplements. So, how's the progress on the new product? Well, we've got the concept down, but we're struggling to come to a consensus. There's a disagreement over who our main target audience should be. I see. Well, that's one of the most critical aspects when it comes to developing a sales strategy. I'm counting on you to handle this new product launch, so make sure you do your best. Yes, sir. After graduating from high school, I worked various part-time jobs. It wasn't until I realized I was headed nowhere that I decided to start my own business. My first venture failed miserably, and so did the next. I scraped together whatever funds I could from anyone I knew and launched what I considered my last chance, a company that sells health supplements. The early days were full of challenges, but I managed to overcome them one by one, and eventually, the business started to take off. Now, I'm doing quite well financially, but I believe it's all a result of my hard work. The reason I made it this far is because I hit rock bottom once in my life. That was back in high school. I was raised by a single mother, and during high school, I juggled multiple part-time jobs, desperately trying to support our household. Hey, Chris. You're off to work again? Yeah. I can't afford to take a break. My mom hurt her back and can't work right now, so I have to step up. Man, it must suck being poor. If you were born into a rich family like mine, you'd be set for life. Yeah, you could look at it that way, but I don't think our life is hard. My mom and I get by just fine, and we enjoy our time together. Sounds like sour grapes to me. All I hear is the whining of a loser. This was John, a classmate from high school. From the moment he enrolled, it was clear he was exceptionally smart, almost too smart for a public school. On top of that, his parents owned a construction company, so he was financially well off. He was the kind of person everyone envied. However, having so much made him prone to looking down on others. It's not sour grapes, really, but wealth isn't the only measure of happiness, is it? You're smart, so you should know that much. So tell me, what do you have that I don't? Nothing, right? Sure, wealth isn't just about money. That's true. But overall, your life is pretty much that of a peasant, isn't it? I was really taken aback by John's comment. Indeed, John was someone everyone envied. He was above average in looks, highly intelligent, and wealthy. But that doesn't give him the right to look down on others. How could someone so intelligent lack basic human decency? Maybe you're just not capable of understanding other people. What are you talking about? The only thing you have that I don't is part-time job experience, and I don't need that. And with that, John walked off. I was stunned by just how little he thought of me. John had only recently learned that I was raised by a single mother. Before that, he hadn't been this condescending, so it was quite a shock. But dwelling on it wouldn't do me any good. I decided to focus on what I needed to do. Time flew by, and one day during my senior year. Are you okay, Mom? I got a call saying you collapsed suddenly. I'm sorry to worry you. The truth is, I have a chronic illness that's been getting worse. A chronic illness. Yes. I had been managing it well for a while, but it seems it's been progressing without me realizing it. While I was at work, I received a call from the hospital saying that my mom had collapsed and was rushed to the emergency room. I immediately went to see her. She had regained consciousness, but her illness had advanced significantly, and the doctors said she would need to be hospitalized. How long have you known about this illness? A while. But I didn't think it would get this bad. I'm sorry for the trouble, but can you take care of things at home for a while? Don't worry, I'll handle everything at home. But why didn't you tell me sooner? You've been pushing yourself too hard, haven't you? I didn't want to burden you. I guess I did push myself a bit too much. But now I've ended up being a burden anyway, so it's all for nothing. Seeing my mom say this with a smile brought tears to my eyes. If only I had noticed her condition sooner, things wouldn't have gotten this bad. I knew that blaming myself wouldn't change anything, but I couldn't just pretend like nothing had happened. I'm sorry. I should have noticed how sick you were, Mom. There's nothing for you to apologize for. Don't worry about it. Just focus on your treatment, so you can get better and come home soon. Since I had left work to come to the hospital, I said that and headed back to my job. But when I returned, I couldn't concentrate at all and kept making mistakes. Aiden, my manager, understood what I was going through and didn't blame me, but I felt more and more mentally overwhelmed. Aiden, I was thinking of taking on more shifts. Would that be all right? More shifts? Well, we're short-staffed, so I'd appreciate the help, but are you sure you can handle it, with everything going on with your mom? I'll be fine. I need to make up for the income my mom isn't able to earn. All right then, just submit your new schedule when you're ready. And take this home with you. Really? Thank you so much. You've been working hard every day, but don't push yourself too much, okay? If you get sick too, it defeats the purpose. Just do what you can without overdoing it. Yes, sir. Aiden's kindness gave me the strength to keep going. After graduating from high school, I decided not to go to college and instead planned to work full-time at the place where I had been doing part-time jobs. Aiden was more than happy to have me on board as a full-time employee, and I was looking forward to working hard. But just a week after graduation, her condition has suddenly worsened. She may only have a month left. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. I'm truly sorry. What? That can't be. She was just talking to me not long ago, looking fine. This isn't possible. I'm very sorry, but please, spend the remaining time with her as meaningfully as you can. Dr. Turner had just given me my mom's terminal diagnosis, and I couldn't accept it. But as the days passed, her condition rapidly deteriorated, and soon she could barely speak. Dr. Turner explained that she had been holding on through sheer willpower, but now that will had finally run out. Time passed quickly after that, and before I knew it, my mom was gone. I talked to Aiden and decided to quit my job to spend the remaining time with her. After she passed, I was overwhelmed with a deep sense of emptiness. No matter what I did, I couldn't find the motivation to move forward. It felt like I was left alone in complete darkness. Having not gone to college, my social connections had become thin. My high school friends were all starting new lives at college. With no one around to rely on, I found myself lost. I eventually returned to work, but the sense of emptiness led to frequent mistakes, and I spiraled into self-loathing. Chris, are you okay? I'm sorry. I keep messing up at work. I know you've got to support yourself, but don't push too hard. Take care of yourself first. Thank you. I'll try. Even though Aiden was understanding and supportive, I couldn't seem to recover mentally. I only worked enough to get by, spending the rest of my time at home, doing nothing. I tried playing video games, but I couldn't get into them. Movies didn't hold my attention either. I thought about going out for drinks with friends, but my lack of motivation always won out. I kept telling myself that if I continued like this, I'd waste some of the most important years of my life. But I just couldn't seem to break free from the darkness. Then, one day, thank you very much. I had some business at the city hall and was on my way home, passing through the station area. That's when I came across someone doing a street performance. They had just finished a song and were getting ready for the next one. I had nothing waiting for me at home, so I decided to stay and listen to one song. Please listen to my next song, Living for Tomorrow. Her singing wasn't exactly outstanding. She was slightly better than an average person, but I doubted she would ever make it big as a singer. Still, she had a small but dedicated group of fans who came to listen to her street performances. She must have been working hard for quite some time. I stayed and listened to one song, then another. Before I knew it, I had listened to several songs, and the street performance for the day had come to an end. Thank you for staying until the end. I enjoyed it. You have a beautiful voice. Thank you. Have you been performing here for a long time? It's been about a year now. She had been persisting with this for a whole year. That's really impressive, and I couldn't help but respect her dedication. That's amazing. It's not something you can do with a half-hearted attitude. Is becoming a singer your dream? There were times when I wanted to give up, but I can't let go of my dream because my mom was always my biggest fan. I want to honor her memory. I see. I'm sure your mom is very proud of you. Yes, actually, she passed away due to an illness. But I believe she's watching over me from heaven. That's why I want to become the singer I couldn't show her while she was alive, and tell her all about it. I was deeply moved by her strength. By coincidence, she had experienced a similar loss to mine, but she had a stronger will and was taking action. Of course, it's not right to compare myself to others, but I realized that I hadn't been able to act with the same strength of heart that she had. I hadn't even come to terms with the reality in front of me. The pain of losing a parent is something only those who have gone through it can understand. That's why I was so impressed by her resilience. How did you get through that kind of pain? I haven't really overcome it. But if my mom saw me sad, she wouldn't be able to rest in peace. I want her to be smiling in heaven. So, I guess it's just my own ego. She said this with a smile. Deep down, she was still struggling, but she had a strong will to keep going. Seeing her made me realize that I couldn't just stay stuck in place. I'll come again. I'll be cheering for you. I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you. Keep up the good work. From that day on, I went to watch her street performances every day. I didn't do anything special, but just seeing her work hard motivated me to push myself as well. Around 6 months after my mother passed away, I began to take small steps to change my situation. While working at a convenience store, I began to entertain the idea of starting my own business. 5 years flew by in the blink of an eye, and during that time, I tried various business ventures. But they all ended in failure, and I was left with almost nothing. I borrowed money from acquaintances and even resorted to consumer loans. With the little money I could scrape together, I started one last business, a company selling health supplements. Over the years, I have learned a lot about marketing and the keys to success in business through trial and error. I was determined to make this last chance a success. With that resolve, I poured everything into running my company. In the beginning, the business didn't take off right away, but after countless tries and adjustments, it finally started to gain momentum. Now, I'm not a millionaire, but I've managed to earn enough to live a comfortable life. It's been a while, Aiden. Long time no see. How have you been? Recently, I've been running a company, and I'm enjoying life for the most part. But of course, there's still a lot of work ahead. After my company started to do well, I reconnected with Aiden, who had been my manager at the part-time job. Aiden was one of the people who supported me when I was trying to start a new chapter in my life. At the same time, there was someone else I wanted to thank. I'm actually trying to find a street performer. Do you happen to know anything about the person who used to sing in front of the station? I think I might have seen her before, but I'm not sure. Aiden, I know you're busy, so it's okay if you don't know. I understood that Aiden had his own responsibilities, so I wasn't really expecting much. But still, I felt a strong desire to find the woman who used to do those street performances and express my gratitude to her. It was because of her that I had been able to push myself this far. Seeing her perseverance had inspired me to keep going as well. However, she no longer performed on the streets. Did that mean she had become a professional singer? I couldn't be sure, but I believed that wherever she was continuing to pursue her dreams. I decided that I would continue striving in my own life as well. Then one day, I received a wedding invitation. It was from an old classmate, John. He was always smart, and I wondered if he was running a company like I was. Either way, since he took the trouble to invite me, I decided to attend. It's been a while, John. Wait, is that you, Chris? What are you doing here? What? Did you actually get an invitation? Wow, my team really messed up. What do you mean? At my level, I don't even bother with writing my own wedding invitations. I had my staff handle it all. But I can't believe they sent one to you too. Well, since you're here, I guess it's too late to do anything about it. John said this with a smug grin. Looking back, I realized he'd always looked down on me, even when we were in the same class. It seemed that even now, as adults, his basic personality hadn't changed. Whatever. So, are you planning on staying for the whole thing? Well, I came to celebrate your wedding, so yeah. Just make sure you don't embarrass me in front of my wife, alright? She's a famous idol, after all. And I've got some friends from Harvard too. So don't make me look bad. I was stunned into silence by his words. He had always been smart, but Harvard was one of the top universities in the world. At the time, I never imagined he'd become someone recognized on a global scale. Harvard University. That's really impressive. Yeah, well, people like you and I are just on different levels. Despite his impressive achievements, I couldn't help but wonder why his personality was so unpleasant. But this was his wedding day. It would be inappropriate for me to cause any trouble here. With that thought, I made my way to the guest tables. Hey everyone, long time no see. Oh, you're here too. Man, John marrying an idol, that's something to be jealous of. Yeah, he did mention something like that. I wonder who the idol is. What? You don't know? You haven't been watching TV lately, have you? You're so out of touch. When I said that, everyone around me started laughing. Was it really such an unusual thing? I wasn't very familiar with idols, and I'd been so focused on running my company that I barely watched TV or spent time online. Since my health supplement business primarily targeted the elderly, I hadn't focused much on social media marketing, which might have contributed to my lack of knowledge. She must be really famous. Well, John is a Harvard graduate, so I guess it makes sense. As I was saying this, the bride and groom entered the room. I wondered who this famous idol could be. I watched them with curiosity. And the moment I saw the bride's face, I felt a chill run down my spine. I was completely speechless. Thank you all so much for being here today. The bride began, her eyes locking directly onto mine as she spoke. Our eyes met, and I felt my heart begin to race. Normally, there's a set order to follow, but since this is my wedding, I hope you'll forgive a slight breach of etiquette. There's someone I want to thank first. Mr. Chris Tanner, sitting at the back. The bride smiled warmly and pointed at me. It was her, the street performer I had been searching for all this time. I never imagined that she had gone on to become an idol after leaving behind her street performances. "Could you please come up here?" She said this to me. I wasn't sure what to do, but with encouraging gestures from the people around me, I made my way up to the stage. Even John, the groom, seemed clueless about what was happening, just like everyone else. "It's been a long time. Do you remember me, Chris?" "Of course I do. It's really been a long time. I'm shocked to see you here." I felt a bit embarrassed, not only because it had been so long since we last met, but also because of all the eyes on us. Before we start the ceremony, I'd like to share a little about myself. It's no exaggeration to say that I'm here today as an idol and now marrying John because of Chris. He was the one who pulled me out of the darkest time in my life. Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke. John was visibly taken aback by her words. Could it be that he knew what she had gone through? But I was utterly confused. She had saved me, but I couldn't recall doing anything significant for her. Why was she saying this? As many of you might know, I started my career by doing street performances. I worked hard for years, but I wasn't successful either as a singer or as a person with any real presence. I was ready to give up when I met Chris. What? I was putting on a brave face, pretending to be confident, but I had just lost my beloved mother and was at my breaking point. But Chris, he kept coming to my performances and encouraging me. He always said, "I'll be back to see you again." You can't imagine how much those words meant to me. They gave me the strength to keep going, knowing someone was waiting to hear me sing. She continued, her voice cracking with emotion as tears streamed down her face. Back then, I was too caught up in my own problems to notice what she was going through, even though I was the one who had been helped. Somehow, without realizing it, I had become a source of motivation for her. Is that really true? Yes. At that time, I felt like I had no future as a singer, no mother, and no reason to keep going. I was trapped in a dark place with no way out, and it was unbearable. But you were the one who saved me. I've heard a lot about those days from Sophia, though I never imagined that the person she talked about was you, Chris. I guess I owe you a thank you as well. Maybe it's because of you that we're able to celebrate this day. So, really, thank you. I never expected to hear such words from John. I always thought he would look down on me no matter what. I never imagined that knowing the truth would change his attitude so much. His pride made me think he'd never alter his stance towards someone he deemed beneath him. But you helped me too. When I was at my lowest, seeing you work so hard gave me the strength to keep going. Is that so? I didn't know your real name because you were using your stage name, and I thought I'd never get a chance to thank you properly. But I'm so glad we could meet again here. As I said this, the room erupted in applause. We shook hands, and I returned to my seat. It was a touching reunion, but I reminded myself that the day belonged to the bride and groom. I was here to celebrate them. Still, I was deeply moved by our reunion. And it wasn't just me. She had managed to change her life because of me too. Whether it was just a polite sentiment or not, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The wedding proceeded smoothly after that, and later, John called me over. You're probably as surprised as I was, but what Sophia said is true. She was really struggling back then, and I'm grateful you were there for her. I used to look down on you for a lot of things, but I've got to admit, I've reconsidered. It's nothing, really. I was just doing what I could. I was struggling back then too, and seeing her push through helped me a lot. Sophia, she's an incredible person. You know, after graduating from Harvard, I failed to get the job I really wanted. It shook my confidence a lot. Sure, I ended up with a good job at a major company here in Japan, but the pressure from everyone's expectations was overwhelming. Yeah, I guess everyone has their own struggles, no matter who they are. It was Sophia who reached out and helped me during that time. I didn't marry her because she's an idol, but because I was drawn to who she is as a person. I felt instinctively that with her by my side, I could overcome any obstacle. So, when I heard that you were the one who helped her, I was really surprised. I never imagined the connection between us would come full circle like this. John often flaunted his intelligence, education, and family background. But maybe that was just his way of protecting himself from the pressure he felt from those around him. It's true that his attitude often made others uncomfortable. But it was clear that he had his own struggles that only he could understand. Sophia had saved me. And without realizing it, I had somehow saved her too. And now, this had all come back around to help someone I once resented. Life is full of surprises, and the connections between people endure in unexpected ways. I was genuinely happy to see these two find happiness together and felt a deep sense of joy in celebrating their union. Once again, congratulations on your wedding. I'm sure you two will be very happy together. Thanks. By the way, what kind of work are you doing these days? Not that I mean to pry, but if you're having a tough time, I could always put in a word with my dad's company. No, actually, I started my own business after everything that happened. I realized I couldn't keep going the way I was. My mom's watching over me from heaven, and I didn't want her to worry. So, I scraped by and put everything into it. And now I run a company that sells health supplements. That's amazing. I had no idea you were working so hard. We both have our challenges ahead, but let's keep pushing forward. I'm rooting for you. Thanks. John then moved on to greet the other guests. I thought he hadn't changed since high school, but maybe that was only on the surface. Perhaps, deep down, he had always been a decent guy. As I thought about this, I imagined the two of them living a happy life together, and a small smile crept onto my face. Just then, Chris. Oh, Sophia. Congratulations again on your wedding. Thank you. I was so happy to see you again here. I've been wanting to express my gratitude. Anne, I'm sorry about what John said earlier. Oh, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. It seems she was aware of our earlier conversation, likely from John himself. But I wasn't bothered by it anymore, especially after learning about his true feelings. John may say some harsh things, but deep down, he's a good person. He's generous with his time and money when it comes to helping others. That's why I decided to marry him. And because of his status, a lot of people approach him for the wrong reasons, such as money, connections, or just to use him as a stepping stone. So, please stay close as a true friend he can trust. Of course. I look forward to keeping in touch. I gave a small bow and then left the wedding venue. After that, life returned to normal. I was busy with work every day, but lately, I've been feeling a bit more fulfilled. I've made some new friends, a couple who invite me to outdoor activities like barbecues and camping on the weekends. You never know what life will throw at you. There are times when you'll be plunged into the depths of despair, and other times when you'll feel on top of the world. But no matter what situation you find yourself in, it's important to remember that life has a way of working itself out. No matter how much pain you endure, or how harsh the reality you face, things won't stay the same forever. If you keep fighting and pushing through, you'll eventually find a way out. And another thing that's crucial is the connections between people. I plan to continue valuing those connections and my own life as I move forward.